Hey everybody, it's Dave with DII. We're live today. We're having our live handpan class. We do this every 2 weeks. Today we have a guest. His name is Ricky. He's from at Rewild Your Soul. He's got a YouTube channel, Rewild Your Soul. Everything basically is branded. Everything he's got little his name everywhere. So look for Rewild Your Soul on Instagram or any of those platforms, Etsy, I believe even, and check him out. We're going to bring him on in just a second. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed to our channel already, please subscribe to our channel. Click the red subscribe button below the screen here. And if you have, thank you so much for already being a subscriber. Another thing, if you haven't been to our website's davesislandinstruments.com. If you want to join our newsletter, you can go down to the bottom of the homepage and click the newsletter button. It'd be great to have you as a subscriber on that as well. You get notifications of our different live shows and all of the different specials we've got going on from time to time. All right. So I'm David Beery, owner of Dave's Island Instruments. I make these handpans. This show is all about handpans, and frequently we bring on guests to talk about handpans. When I had the store pre-COVID, we would bring people in as classes every 2 weeks, and we would teach handpan classes here at the store. It was a really great way to get knowledge passed between me and the customers, and they could rent handpans because we have handpan rentals here at the store. And it was a really great way to meet people. So I'm David Beery, owner of Dave's Island Instruments. I make these handpans.
I'm hearing my voice
about
back
handpans
again.
And frequently. All right, there we go. And so I had the live show here at DII, or not the show, but the handpan class. And we would have people come, and it was a great way to meet people and get them introduced to the handpan, that sort of thing. Obviously, since COVID hit, we've been going online and doing this online every 2 weeks. So thanks for everybody that's watching who's been here for recurring weeks, and it's really great to see the same names come up. And it's, if anybody has any comments, by the way, feel free to put comments in the comments area. We can read those comments, and if we get some good questions, we can answer them live. All right, one final thing on our website. If you go to our website, if you're looking for lessons, handpan lessons, we've got a lessons platform now. We call it the DII community. So you can go to the home page. There's usually a little drop down that comes down. You can click on that. Otherwise, you can go to the services page and look for DII community and grab some lessons there. It's a really great platform. So, all right, with no further ado, we're going to bring Ricky on. Ricky, are you there? There he is. All right. Woohoo.
Nice to see you.
Thank you so much, Ricky, for being here. Yeah, this is great.
I appreciate it.
All right, so I'm over here in the LA area, over in Lakewood, California, and you are where?
I'm all the way across the country on the East Coast in Massachusetts.
Nice, beautiful Massachusetts. All right, so for everybody to know, I've never personally met Ricky. This is one of our first times talking. We've only talked a couple times before this, so it's really me and him getting to know each other still, and it's a lot of fun because he's got a very interesting experiences with the handpan. He's a middle school teacher, and he also incorporates sometimes handpan and tongue drums with his middle school students. He teaches, I believe, online as well with handpan and tongue drum students.
Yep.
As well.
Correct.
And so he has all sorts of experience with handpans. As you can see in the background there, he's got several handpans like on the walls, on the floor. He's like a librarian of handpans almost. So he's got a bunch of handpans. So he knows all the in-depth secrets about all sorts of things. He's talked with multiple tuners. He's got his own podcast. So anyway, he's really a wealth of information. So I'm glad to have him on here today. So with that being said, Ricky, why don't you just say hi and maybe give us a quick bio so we kind of know who you are and where you came from.
Absolutely. My name's Ricky. Rewild Your Soul, again, as Dave said, is all my social media, Instagram, YouTube, etc. My background, unlike a lot of players, is not in percussion, but is in string instruments. And I've always been a songwriter. So my approach when I first discovered these instruments was to kind of apply my experience with songwriting to structuring things on them. And I think that approach led me in a very different path than a lot of players who are coming from a percussion background. Both styles work perfectly well on here, but I'd say a majority of people are not writing songs that have verse, chorus, refrain. So there's so many different ways of approaching these instruments. I think that's what makes them so fun.
Yeah.
Growing up, I lived in Antigua. So I was around the steel drum, and I didn't really make the connection until maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I kind of had that in my head that I wanted to experience and play with that instrument eventually. So the handpan as an iteration of that steel drum. So
yeah.
Yeah, and like Dave said, I'm a teacher. I'm an herbalist. I teach foraging and medicinal plant classes out here, and I think that the handpan and tongue drums have the capacity to pull music out of people who are sort of apprehensive to put themselves out there. I think the
Hmm.
simplicity of it and the accessibility really lets people feel more comfortable very quickly when engaging
Yeah.
with it. Unlike a guitar, you couldn't just hand someone a guitar and say, "Here, here's a
Right.
minute lesson."
Right.
So it's nice to see sort of democratized accessibility to music. So
Sure.
I love
Absolutely.
everything about
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And I want to get more into your songwriting stuff a little bit later. First time I saw you, I believe it was probably in one of your YouTube videos. You've got a really good YouTube presence. I've seen you on do several things. First time, actually, I think I saw you for a while, actually, until I first spoke with you. I think I thought you were in the Netherlands somewhere. The imagery and the backgrounds and everything were always like all forested and green and beautiful. So
That's
that's where originally. So when you said you're from Massachusetts, I was like, oh, okay, a little closer. So that was fun. Uh, but yeah, your YouTube videos are great. I think you do a great job with those, and they're always really even and lots of education going on with those as well. Oh, it looks like Daniel might have a comment or a question here.
Yes, we've had Siri Lorenz said happy to be here. Also, we have Athena
glad you're
Stamos
here.
says hi, Dave and Ricky. Happy to be here watching live again. Athena up in Studio City. I can already tell Ricky is a wealth of knowledge. Grateful for this work.
Oh, that's
Totally.
very sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Athena. Thank you, Siri. How are you doing, Siri? I know you're out there. Thanks for checking in with us. That's great. Um, All right. So, what's your history with handpans? So, how did you get? Because handpans they were started in the year 2000, basically. So they're only about
Mhm.
21 years old in its entire history. I got started about 2010, uh, and even then, I felt like I was a late bloomer. But
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
did you get involved? And what was like the very first handpan you touched? And like, how did it make you feel? And all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the first visual and audio example of a handpan I ever heard was online. The classic David Swarup or Daniel Waples
Right.
tunes
Right.
that are still pervasive on the internet.
Yeah.
Um, First time I physically touched one, I think was 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
And
Okay.
back then, it's hard to believe now because they're so available. It
Yeah.
like you can get one today, but back
Yeah.
then it was, as you know, a search for them. So I joined
Right.
the handpan forums, scoured that for a place to get a handpan, and I eventually found. I think they were a newer maker at the time, and purchased one. And it was a great instrument to learn on, but I kind of moved on from that and
Yeah.
purchased a Rav, and then purchased other handpans. So but the
Yeah.
first time touching that, it just felt I felt very connected to it
Right.
in a way because I'm very comfortable with the songwriting process, like I said on
Yeah.
guitar. So to translate that over to a handpan was it felt familiar enough to not be strenuous or kind of stressful to approach, but
Yeah.
different enough where I felt like it opened up a new direction for songwriting and for thinking about music for me.
Right.
So it was really inspirational to pick that up. And I find that with all instruments, like the sitar, rabob, all sorts of world instruments. Every time I pick up a new instrument, it makes me feel like I have a different color to paint with, or it brings me in a
Sure.
different
Right.
direction. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love the experience of trying a new scale or trying a new maker's instrument. They all kind of lead you in different directions.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you first got the first handpan, I'm assuming you probably didn't have a teacher, right? You probably had to teach yourself to
No,
some degree.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
That's kind of the
how did
beauty.
that go? Like, did you find you were using certain fingers that you no longer use? Did you play it in a certain way that you no longer play? Like, how's the growth happened with that aspect?
I think the tendency for all new players is to strike too hard. Maybe not all, maybe 70% of players,
Yeah.
especially if you're
Yeah.
coming from a percussion background. I feel like people
Yeah.
are just very prone to wailing on the instrument.
Right.
Um, for me, I definitely, unfortunately,
Yeah.
for me, I was doing a lot of thumb striking, which I still use a lot,
Uh huh.
particularly on the Rav. The Rav responds very well to your thumbs.
Okay. Yeah.
And obviously, ding on a handpan is receptive to that in the bottom few notes. But I think I transitioned more to paying attention to the dynamics that each finger or the pad of your finger or the point of your finger. I think getting the basic strikes down is really important, but the refinement comes with experiencing it more and using your ears and seeing, does this fit what I'm trying to say? Does my thumb really make the sound that I want while I'm saying this? So it took a while to develop that, but I think, I'd say after a couple of months of playing, I felt comfortable enough, and then it's developed for the last 7 years. So
yeah, absolutely. Hey, Daniel, I see a new comment there. What does that one say there?
Hi from San Diego from Diva. Just
awesome. Hey, Diva. Very cool.
Hi, Diva.
Thanks for the comment. All right, so yeah, real quick. So with that being said, like for instance, when I teach, I typically teach just kind of like a flat finger attack like this. It's just one of my more common ways of playing. But I spoke with a couple other people, and some people use like the very tip of their finger. They say they cut their fingernails so they're really short, and so you can use the tip of your finger to like kind of get a real warm tone out of it without getting a certain kind of attack and like a slap to it.
Yeah.
So I've actually, it's interesting because I did play with that technique a little bit from time to time, but I never really considered it like something that was my primary way of playing. Usually I played it when I wanted to get a softer, more delicate sound out of the instrument. So
absolutely.
Do you have a handpan there that you could just show us like pretty much like your main, like whatever your main playing technique is? It'd be kind of interesting to see how you do that.
I divide things up. I do this with my students as well. I would say my thumbs I'm using on the bottom half of the instrument.
Oh, okay.
And my pointer fingers I'm using on the top half. Just because I find that's a little more ergonomic for my hands. So maybe notes 4 through 8. I'll have with a slap, and I'm slapping halfway off of the tone field, which I'm sure you do something similar to that. So my fingers kind of overhanging the edge of the dimple here. And I think for me, I didn't find that the poking technique gave this quite the sound I was looking for. And as a guitar player, my right hand had very long nails for a while, so I just threw that out.
Oh, good point.
For me as a player. But I feel like that bony part of your thumb, but a little bit further in for me is the best spot, because it has the hardness of your knuckle, but it has a little bit of padding. At least my very pointy thumb, playing so long, have it now. So I'm not getting as much of attack on the instrument. And I find, like I said, when players just start playing, whether it's the Rav or it's the handpan, the tendency is to be too soft or be very, very hard. So finding that balance for people between, the dynamics of that strike is kind of a tricky thing. But once you find the sweet spot for that, and the handpan kind of lets you know and how it sounds. Obviously, if it's blaring and squealing, it doesn't like you hitting it that hard. I always describe it as a firm but sort of quick strike, like you're touching something hot. You're letting your hand off.
I sometimes say that too. Like if it's hot, you just got to get your finger off of it real quick.
Absolutely. And there's some people too, when they pick them up, their hands do that naturally. And I think a lot of the issue that people have with getting an initial clear strike is using too much of their hands. I find that when you bring your hand down to strike, you have a tendency to leave your hand on too long. But if you're flicking down a little bit more, I feel like it's easier for people to quickly get a clean sound because their thumb wants to rebound back. If you're flicking down versus going, same with the slap as well. I'm minimizing my motion. And the more complex you get in your playing, I feel like the most ergonomic way of doing it is probably the best way to do it, because it's taking less brain power to do that sort of movement. So
so it's interesting. I had a couple experiences when teaching people here at the store. Frequently a lot of people have like a curved looking finger, like almost like they're playing piano, and then they try to like grab at the note, like kind of like that. And that's a real common thing I've seen with people. And so with that grabbing motion, they tend to mute the note at the same time. So they kind of need to get away from that. And then another time there was somebody who was kind of doing that motion, that grabbing motion a little bit. but she just couldn't get it. She was kind of like muting the note and that sort of thing. And then I told her to play softer. And then immediately, pretty much after she started playing softer, quote unquote, she got a better sound. And I think it's kind of like we were just talking about. It's like, I think she was trying too hard. She was putting too much energy into it. And then when she just relaxed a little bit, with the term soft, I think ultimately translated into to relax, right? So I think when she relaxed, that's when she started getting a better tone.
I think that's 100% true. Most of the students that I begin with, even people who are further along, we can all benefit from kind of saying, all right, I'm going to keep my hands as loose as possible. Because the more rigid you are, the more force you're applying in general, and the more attention you're giving to those hands. So a relaxed hand is definitely the most ideal approach to striking. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned the difference between percussion players and like songwriting playing.
Yeah.
And I still want to get involved with songwriting, so we can go there if we want to. But just really quick, like, what do you think the difference is? Because like on the YouTube videos, everyone watches all these YouTube videos of these really fantastic players, and obviously, like kind of what you're getting at, there's some players that play really actively, right? And then there's other players that might play and sing maybe at the same time, or they have like an actual song kind of written out on the handpan where they're not just playing like super fast or with all sorts of bells and whistles. So kind of give me your opinion on like that, how what the difference is, and I don't know, just give me your little opinion.
Yeah. For me, I think the way I differentiate this, and I think I've said this in a couple other appearances too, people who have a percussion background, the rhythm itself and the technique is driving the song. And I think some of the but some of the better known handpan players within that community are percussionists. I think that when you're appealing to a broader audience that's not necessarily interested in percussion, making it relatable in terms of melody and chordal movement, but still maintaining the percussive and the movement and the techniques. I think that's kind of people who play melodically and who are songwriters are kind of taking the middle road between those two. You can't avoid being percussive on this instrument, but I think there's a mentality of this is a drum, and it's definitely melodic percussion. And I think a lot of the material that's available now to you is percussion oriented. So my goal with all of my work has been to kind of present the other side of approaching the instrument, because it's so multifaceted that there's probably a million other ways you could approach it as well. But
I hate to put you on the spot. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to say, I hate to put you on the spot, but do you have an example of like a percussive playing, or could you play an example of melodic playing?
Actually, there is a question going towards us.
Great. A question. Okay.
I have it on the screen. It says it's from Athena Stamos. Only having a handpan for a month. Interesting about the various ways to play with your hands. I've been playing around and wondering how others do it. To be explained, not just watching. So thanks.
Oh, cool. Thank you, Athena.
Perfect. Relevant.
Yeah.
I can show you an example of that. So I think the iconic what we think of as the classic handpan style is something that's like whereas the middle road between that might be something like so the rhythm is still driving it. You can't avoid a rhythm driving a song. But it's incorporating dyads and triads in a way that ties it together, so that the phrases seem connected. It's really easy. If you pick a rhythm and you just say, I'm going to play this rhythm on the center note, and then you substitute out a beat or two, you can make a song immediately. just from
Yeah.
that technique. It takes a little bit more planfulness to say, I like the combination of 3 and 5, 2 and 4, 1 and 2, and 1 and 3. So if I was creating based off of those 4 movements, I would say, okay, I have note 3 and 5. What upper notes might fit with that triad? So I'd be using my ear and saying 8 works well, 7 works well, 6, that's fine. That top half works for that note. And paying attention to that, you can kind of piece together a melody based off of substituting a beat. And I always think of the instrument as divided in half. So in my mind, the bottom half is kind of like the rhythm guitar and the chordal movement. The top half is very much the solo guitar player. So you're using the bottom half to support what you're doing on the top.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just structurally, it makes it easier to say like, oh, if I have a melody on the top half, that's my melody on the top half, changing just one aspect on the bottom half changes the chord or a note that's going to relate to that melody.
Got it. Yeah.
Super simple way of viewing it.
Yeah.
But it's a way of creating movement within a song, but still having everything related together.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I use that same technique, but I never really thought of it in the same way that you're introducing right now, which like you're talking about the back side of the instrument and the front side. I've always just thought about it as low notes and high notes, right? Because in my little musical brain, that's the way I think of bass lines and melody lines. But as far as like looking at it visually, that makes a lot of sense, especially for beginners. They can just tell themselves, okay, over here is my the back end where I'm going to do the bass line or whatever you want to call it, and then this is all the melody notes up here. I love it. So thank you for that. That's great.
Absolutely.
It's really easy to explain that way.
Actually, we just got another question, you guys. Actually, it's just going right in order because broadcast music is what other instruments work best in collaboration with the handpan? That's not pretty awesome. Different ways to play handpan, and then
yeah. What do you feel? I personally, I love pretty much anything. I think the only thing that on my end that might not work perfectly would be like bagpipes or something. But
that could work. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. It all depends on how you work it, right? It all depends. So
it's true. For me, I just finished. I have a new CD coming out on the Rav in the next month, and I like the range of handpans and Ravs with higher range instruments, whether that's a flute or a mandolin or ukulele or any instrument that's a little bit above the range of these particular scales. I think really fill in the cracks in that, particularly if you're somebody who likes to write songs and kind of structure things, because it's almost like you're filling in another layer that's not present, or it's kind of unplayable if one person is approaching it. I think higher instruments, also things that don't necessarily have as long of sustain, whether that's xylophone sort of things, or things that don't compete with but complement the sound of a handpan, I think are good choices. So
I could see almost just basically some kind of contrast, because I was thinking like you could do a sustained sound on a keyboard, like a long pad. But as long as it's kind of a longer sound than the handpan, then the handpan shouts out as being the melodic or the whatever part.
Right.
Or you could do one that's kind of a shorter duration, and then it becomes the melodic again because it's got the longer duration. Interesting. Yeah. I like that.
Yes, absolutely.
But
so with songwriting, we were talking about the percussive playing.
Actually, just a statement real quick, Dave. Kroll the Night says kalimba, strings, and flute sounds really good with the handpan. So good.
Oh, absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah, I particularly love it. Yeah, I love native flute. Native flute is amazing with the handpan.
Yes. I think that because of their higher range, again, they match perfectly with handpan or with Rav.
Question. We have a question. What scale do you recommend for your first handpan? Also, do you recommend? I know. Oh, it's two questions. Also, do you recommend? Here's the The ultimate question: 440 hertz or 432?
Oh yeah, two excellent questions. Perfect. Okay, have at it, Ricky. Go for it, man.
I think we were just talking about this before we get on, but D
Yeah,
minor is the iconic handpan scale. I think, do you
right.
call it sunshine scale?
We
Is that
call
what
it
yours
sunset. A lot of people call
designated?
it Celtic minor.
Sunset.
Yeah.
Yep, Celtic minor. I think curd is a really good intermediary, just
Yep.
because it has
Exactly.
an
Yeah.
extra half step next to the one, and
Yep.
that to me adds a lot to the scale. So I think
Yep.
Celtic curd, um, yeah, that's the iconic one. I would say don't go for one that's a little more harmonic minor sounding right away, unless you connect with it. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
choosing the right scale is saying, does this fit into who I am musically or who I want to be musically?
Yeah.
So maybe you would connect with a Hejaz scale or a La Serena right away. But
Right.
I think the D minors or whatever minor key that you want is kind of a good place to start.
Yeah.
As for
With that being,
432,
go ahead. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, as for 432, I as a flute maker, I make flutes and all sorts of
Nice.
instruments like that too. So to me, I like the sound of 432 if I'm playing by myself or I'm in a recording situation. But I think it's harder if you want to collaborate or you want to play with other instruments because it means retuning a guitar or retuning a mandolin. So it depends on what you're using it for, I guess, is the answer. But it sounds warmer because it's a little bit lower than the A440.
Yeah. With the 432 thing, I also noticed that, like you said, if you're playing by yourself or doing your own recording project, it totally works out. Or if you like, say, you're doing a meditation or a yoga thing in a studio, that's totally fine too, as long as you're the only one playing, or as long as you're playing with other 432 instruments. But I've even found, because my ear is kind of attuned to things, because I'm a tuner. Like I was playing a 432 instrument handpan once, and there was just some kind of music playing in the background, like on a radio somewhere, and it just was like throwing me off because the music on the radio was 440 and I was playing a 432. It made my handpan sound like it was out of tune, even though it's not. It was just tuned to
Yeah.
432, just slightly lower. So
Yeah.
it's got some weird aspects to it. And then there's the whole spirituality side of the 432 idea. And I don't know, do you have any ideas or considerations on that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a popular tuning to purchase for flutes as well. I think metaphysically, I think any vibration has an effect on us, and I could see that a shift in the pitch of that vibration may alter how we hear it and receive it. For
Yeah.
me personally, I hear it is out of tune as well. I don't have perfect pitch, but I have pretty good relative pitch because I tune everything by
Yeah.
ear, guitar and all
Yeah.
that as well. So I have A440 ingrained in my head, so I
Right.
can never fully embrace 432 just for the same reason
Yeah.
you said. To
Yeah.
me, it's always like I always want to make it go up slightly,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think if you connect with it, go for it. I think
Yeah.
it's beautiful as well. So
Yeah, it's definitely an individual kind of thing. So, regarding the scales too, you were talking about maybe not getting like a Hejaz scale right up front because it's got such a distinct sound. My
yeah,
way of explaining that is that sometimes there's certain scales like the Hejaz and that have such a definite sound to them. Like and when you get a Hejaz, you got a Hejaz. There's no doubt about it, right?
absolutely.
Because it has a very Persian sound. It sounds like belly dancers are going to be with you and everything like that. And it's just, so if you're comfortable with that and that's what you want, thumbs up, go for it. But sometimes it's hard to escape from that. So like if you have a Hejaz, you can't really
Absolutely.
play in major or minor as easily. Whereas some of the other scales, for instance, like the sunset or the Celtic minor, even the curd, like you mentioned, they open up a lot of potential for different varieties of kind of musical playing. And it just allows you a little bit broader musical options. The first handpan I ever made was a C major handpan, right?
Interesting.
And because I didn't know what I was doing at the time, I just made a C major. But the problem with that was I couldn't escape from C major. It was like always happy. And so,
Yes.
yeah, there's certain
Yes.
handpans where there's certain scales that just allow you the freedom to kind of explore different sounds and moods. And then there's other scales like the Hejaz or like a C major or whatever that is, that kind of put you in a little bit of a corner. And that's the way I think of it.
Yeah.
Athena's
I call them
asking
flavor
again.
scales.
This is
Yeah,
on
right,
the
right.
432 hertz subject, but she wants to know if you make them, Dave.
We can. Yeah, we can make those like a custom. You just make a custom 432. Yeah,
Cool.
no problem.
Oh wow, questions are coming. Here we go.
Awesome. We're on a good. This is good.
Do you ever incorporate semantics to your tuning? Sort of a
Ooh.
visual tuning. Interesting. I don't know what that is.
How does it somatic? Is it somatics? How's it spelled?
C Y
Cymat.
C I or cymatics. C I or Cymatic's.
All right, I'm unfamiliar with that. Do you know what that is, Ricky?
Yeah, well, I think to demonstrate it, they'll often play a sound on a plate with salt or some sort of a sand,
Oh
and
yeah.
it
Okay.
forms patterns depending on
Right.
the wave that's being played through it. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. I haven't done that. Have you done it? Yeah.
No, not with these. No.
Okay. Yeah. So that I love the idea. I have actually thought about that, getting some sand and putting it on top of here just to see how it vibrates and see the different patterns it makes. I do think that's a fun thing to explore.
People do
I want
that.
to get
I've
back to
seen
I want to get
tuners
back to
use.
songwriting real quick because I think that's one of your fortes. And a lot
Mhm.
of people that own handpans, when after they get beyond the beginner stage and they actually know how to play it and they've got better technique and that sort of thing, that's usually one of the questions I get from people. Like a year later, they'll come back to my store and they'll be like, "Hey, Dave, I've gotten a lot better, but do you have any ideas on how to write a song?" Because they want to explore the
Mm.
handpan at a deeper level at that point. So, like, I loved your idea of splitting the handpan into like the bass range on the back and the melody range on the front.
Yeah.
But what are your other considerations when you? Oh, another quick question. Sorry, I'm going to load you up right now. Uh,
That's okay.
so,
It's
uh,
okay.
uh, um, for me, I always think about like music, and I've got chords in the background. Some people think just like positions, like patterns,
Mhm.
pattern playing, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. And then you mentioned that you have an ear. What did you call it? Like you hear things and you just remember how they sound in certain positions.
Yes.
What was that term
Yeah.
that you used?
Just like an audiographic memory.
Audiographic.
Like
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So let us know how do you develop a song?
So I think, and I'll give away a secret. This is something I do in my lessons too.
All
I
right.
think the simplest the simplest way. Let me move this down. I don't know if everyone's familiar with how handpans are tabbed out, but I think you do it in some of your tutorials as well, Dave. I think of this ding, one closest to me, two to the left, three, four is to the left of center, five right of center, six, seven, eight. This is an 8 note. Some of them are more. If you pick 4 notes, and we're going to use note 3, 4, 5, and 6. And this is a D minor, D Celtic. If I just alter one aspect of those 4 notes, I'm just substituting.
Yeah.
I can change the feeling of what we're doing and give the impression of moving along in a song. So let me show you what I mean.
Okay.
So we're gonna play each of them 4 times, and just changing that first note. And I'm using a 2, and I'm using a 1, and now I'm using the center. So just by altering one aspect of that, we have a sort of like a chordal flow to what we're doing.
Yeah.
And this can be the base for more movement. So once you know where you're going, you can kind of figure out where else you want to go within that. So we could add on something on the top. And I think of that as just a groundwork. So if I was
Yeah.
discovering my instrument for the first time, that would be exactly where I'd start, is picking 4 notes on whatever scale you have, play them in sequence. So if it's 3, you go up to 4, 5, and then 6, wherever you're
Yeah.
going to start, and change one aspect on the lower half of the instrument and see where that takes you. Change it again,
Yeah.
see where that takes you, and then change it one more time. And that to me is the sort of the groundwork for a song, because you're using your ears to listen to how changing that one note changes the feeling of what you're doing. And
Yeah.
then, like I was talking about, if you have the top half as our melodic portion, we have the option of 8, 7, 6, and maybe 5, depending on what we're doing. So you can always just substitute it out, whether it's the first note or whether it's the last note. So that's my tip. Pick 4 notes, play them in order, maybe 4 times in a row, swap that first note, play it 4 more times, swap it again, then 2 more times.
Yeah.
And that could be your groundwork for a song. And then it's up to you how you express the top half melodically.
Right.
Another tip I'd say too, if you picked what I just said, 3, 4, 5, 6, you can also take a split finger if you're comfortable doing it yet, and use that as a double strike on 3 and 5, because we've essentially used these dyads, 3 and 5, 2 and 4. We're going to use 1 and 2 and 1 and 3. But we can express that and make it sound more interesting by counting the same way we did before. So I could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. I'm just alternating between a double strike and a single strike. And you can move this wherever you want on the scale as well. So I can move it up to the top. And this works just because these scales are designed to move from one side to the other. One whole half of it is like one big chord, the other half is another big chord. So I always tell my students, if you start on one side, if you're looking for something melodically related, oftentimes the note on the same side as where you started will connect to whatever you're doing almost every time. So a starting point for a melody could be just, if you start on 3, you know that 5, 7, and probably 8 will work with that note. So.
Yeah. I found that sometimes students, when they come in for the very first time, they have a tendency to like hit on opposite sides like this. They go,
yes,
right? And they're always, you could tell they're searching for some kind of melody, or like, how do I make this sound better? So I usually do tell them also, like, stay on either the right side or the left side, or even proximity wise, you know, like that.
Yeah.
And that usually helps them get more harmonies going. So here's another question for you. A lot of times, again, beginners, especially adult beginners, when you use the word song, it comes with all sorts of baggage with that word, right? Like, because as adult listeners, we're familiar with listening to songs on the radio, songs, right? And usually it means like a 3-minute song, or it means something when you listen to it over and over again, it's the exact same thing every time, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, some people play just, they just make it up every time. They don't actually have anything structured. And they're just really good at doing ad lib, or just making it up. Do you structure your songs? Do you play like the same thing every time, or do you do a lot of ad lib?
So that's one of the things I think that differentiates my writing from other people's. It's 100% written. So I can reproduce the exact song. I have an album that just came out a couple months ago, Lunaria. It's all handpans.
Nice.
There's 7 different scales. But those songs I could reproduce exactly as they are. But my philosophy for still keeping it live, so you don't always want to hear the same exact version of something as an audience. I kind of go with the 70-30 rule. And when I built those songs, I was still thinking in the same way I was expressing here, that I'd have 70% structured. I'd have the movement, I'd know where I was going next, but I'd be aware and proficient enough to take 30% of that song and make it improv. So if I was doing something like, let's see, kind of back to what I was doing before, where I'm doing the little run going down, I may change how I express those 4 notes there. So it could be, so I know where I'm going to go next. When I finish that phrase, I know, I'm going into 2 and 4. So I think starting with something that's a little more static, knowing where you're going, learning where you're going, and then figuring out where you can substitute beats or strikes with sort of different melodic pieces. It's kind of a nice way to add variety to your playing, because people see performers live because it doesn't sound exactly the same. It has a live element. So I think it's nice to kind of keep that alive, especially if you're someone who does like to write, structured music. So
Do you have a structure to your song? Do like a lot of songs on the radio you listen to, it has maybe an intro, it might
Hmm.
have a verse, a chorus, and sometimes it even has a bridge. Do you
Hmm.
ever do any kind of considerations like that with your songwriting?
Absolutely. My songs are literally structured as if they were a guitar song.
Okay,
So
great.
if I have something in the beginning that kind of is the theme for what I'm going to do, I'll think of that as, the verse maybe. And so
Right.
I'll go from verse to chorus, maybe to the bridge, back to the verse. I'll use that first piece as the anchor point for the rest of the things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So my goal in my music is not to provide sort of background music. I want it to feel like a song. There's nothing wrong
Sure.
with background music. It's not a
Yeah.
knock on that at all.
Yeah.
But for me as a listener, I'm attracted to when people kind of have some sort of a movement that my ear is like, I can guess where he's going to go,
Yeah.
or
Right.
I recognize this melody here, or this progression. And I think this is what we forget as handpan players. Most listeners, once they get over the awe of the handpan, because it's easy to be awe anybody with a handpan,
Yeah.
most listeners are familiar with the structuring of music, like you just said.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, my audience isn't necessarily the handpan community. I'm more
Right.
interested in the broader audience of people who don't necessarily have a handpan or a RAV or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
I think within our community, it's easy to appeal to the technical side because that's what we want to see. When I see a
Right. Right.
handpan
Right.
player, I
Right.
want to
Of
see
course.
something crazy. But I
Yeah.
think if I want to listen to something, I wouldn't necessarily want to listen to like a 10-minute technical solo. Like to me, that I
Yeah.
would lose interest after like 3 minutes. So I like to
Yeah.
combine. I think for an audience or just someone starting with something structured, learning where you can fit bits in, and then adding more of the technical stuff in afterwards as a icing on your cake to make it a
Yeah.
little more interesting. You know.
Yeah, for me, like I usually kind of like the idea of I always think of it as a motif, like a small melody or a small idea.
Hmm.
So I create like a small idea, something similar to. Let's just make it really simple, right?
Hmm.
But then, like, how do you come up with something different? Sometimes what I'll do is I'll do something completely different. So that's more melodic. So maybe what I'll do for the second idea is come up with something rhythmic on like two basic notes,
Hmm.
right? Or something like that. And then it kind of breaks it up,
Absolutely.
right?
Hmm.
Or you could do sustained notes, or you could do whatever you do, like a different kind of rhythm, right?
Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite kind of toolkit of like how you would assemble a song?
I think I think the biggest tip, I guess, toolkit wise, is to let go of the note names. This is for beginners. I'm not talking necessarily
Yeah,
for people who are familiar with it. Like kind of eliminate that from your vocabulary and understand it number wise, tab wise, because I think for the beginner that's the easiest place to start. And listen,
yeah,
spend a lot of time with your scale, hitting it kind of whether it's organized or not. I think once you internally associate the position of the notes with the sound, your body kind of automatically knows like if I hit this note, it's related to this other note. And it kind of happens naturally for people. A lot of my work with my students who aren't just starting off is developing songs. So they might say, "Oh, I really like this melody. What the heck can I do with it to make it into a song?"
yeah,
So we would go through how do you break that apart,
yeah,
and say if you like the seven, you could look for a pairing on the bottom half. So it could be also finding little licks and runs and fills that you like. It's nice to have a bank of them in your head if you do
right,
begin to
right,
structure your
right,
music
right.
a little bit
Sure.
more,
Yeah,
because then like I'll find myself doing like that sort of a stuff, that sort of thing, or I like to do double strikes a lot, so something like.
yeah,
But there's ways of making even like a simple melody more interesting just by adding more movement to it. And even something like that, if I'm just playing, that might be a good way to start something.
Yeah.
To make it a little bit spicier, it's just doubling up the notes.
Okay.
And then if you do the same thing that I was talking about, and then you could alter the melodic portion as well. So.
Yeah. Well, one surefire way of making sure that you don't or that you create new stuff every time is if you record yourself and listen back, because
absolutely
recording yourself is always an amazing experience, because you don't always, when you listen back, you go, oh, I did that, and like, oh my gosh, or I'm doing the same thing multiple times. I need to stop doing that same thing. Or, recording is really important to listen to. Yeah.
I agree. And I think when you're in that flow as well, it's hard to hold back what you've produced in that moment. So having a recording, you can kind of pick apart like, oh, I would have forgotten this if I hadn't recorded this
right.
section.
Yeah,
so
that too. Absolutely.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
That's a great tip.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, this was a great discussion. I think we had like a gazillion lots of questions, and I learned a lot from you, Ricky.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks so much. And by the way, everybody, Ricky has a podcast, like I mentioned before, and I'm going to be on his podcast next week, so that should be fun. Do you have any advertisements or any kind of thing you want to say about what you do, or how to access the stuff that you do?
Yeah, for sure. My Instagram, like they said in the beginning, is Rewild Your Soul, and feel free to reach out. I like talking to everybody, so even if you just want to say hi, please do it. My album Lunaria is on Spotify and iTunes. It's Lunaria by Rewild Your Soul. It has like a gazillion different instruments on it, so it's pretty unique, and it's structured, so it has a song feel to it. But I also offer lessons, one-on-one lessons. I was traveling to New York and Boston a lot to teach, but with everything going on, I'm not doing that so much.
Yeah.
But, just say hello. I'd love to talk to you guys. I love meeting new people. So
absolutely. Cool. Daniel, do we have any final shout outs or any questions that were there?
Athena is saying amazing workshop. Thank you to both of you. Ricky,
awesome. Thank you, Athena.
Awesome. Just listening to you about the song stuff is amazing. I actually, taking a simple beat and then just adding the movements on top of it, I think is a great nugget that I took away from it. And just what you guys were talking about, the song side, because like I love that, not a lot of people do that. They do the percussion, technical side, and then thinking about the songs. I think that's pretty amazing, because I've heard people sing with the handpan and harmonize with the notes, and it's pretty amazing. So if you can introduce that into a song, it's pretty awesome. So thank you very much for your wisdom.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
You guys are great. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Ricky. All right. So a couple weeks from now, we're going to have Sapita on. She's a DIY customer, and Sapita has purchased her own handpan. She actually had a rental the first time she came here. She rented a handpan for a good duration of time, then she bought one, and she's made all sorts of progress. So we're going to be talking to Sapita in 2 weeks. It's going to be a really great conversation. So we invite you back for that. Once again, thank you so much, Ricky, for joining us today. It was a real pleasure meeting you, and I hope I can get over to Massachusetts and hang out with you one of these days. That would be fun to jam on a street corner with you.
Hey, did you want to leave us with a tune, Ricky? If you have something,
yeah,
maybe?
You want to play us out?
We can fade out with tunes from Ricky Hillson. Here we go.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
everybody for joining. Awesome. Keep on going, Ricky. Visit him on Rewild, Your Soul Music, and namaste. And thank you for joining.
There you go. All
Have
right,
a good
man.
one, everybody.
Peace.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys. Absolutely.